It hung suspended, a shimmering pearl clinging to the edge of a rusty gutter, the last raindrop. It was a moment of delicate beauty, a fleeting instance that seemed to hold the weight of the world. The drop quivered as if aware of its significance before gravity finally claimed it. Below, a puddle, still reflecting the overcast sky, awaited its inevitable demise. The surface of the puddle mirrored the clouds, creating a perfect illusion of the heavens on earth. It was a small, quiet testament to the rain that had once been so abundant. With a tiny plink, barely audible over the city's din, it fell. The drop's impact sent ripples across the puddle, distorting the reflection of the sky. It was a small sound, easily lost in the noise of the city, but it marked the end of an era. Little did humanity know this was no ordinary rainfall ending, but the curtain call for an era. The rain had been a constant companion, a background to the rhythm of daily life. Now its absence would be felt in ways both subtle and profound. The rains, as if by some unseen decree, had ceased. The skies cleared, revealing a sun that seemed brighter and more relentless than ever before. The world was bathed in a harsh, unyielding light. Across the globe, reactions to the sudden absence of rain were initially met with relief. Umbrellas were discarded, raincoats relegated to the backs of closets. People celebrated the end of what they saw as an inconvenience, not realizing the true cost of this change. Raincoats, once essential, were now forgotten relics of a bygone era. They hung in closets, gathering dust, symbols of a world that had changed overnight. Festivals celebrating the sunshine were hastily organized. Communities came together to revel in the unexpected gift of perpetual sunlight. There was music, dancing, and laughter, a collective sigh of relief that the rain was finally gone. Farmers, temporarily spared from flooded fields, rejoiced. They saw the end of rain as a blessing, a chance to cultivate their crops without the constant threat of waterlogging. For a brief moment, it seemed like a golden age of agriculture was upon them. The world, bathed in perpetual sunlight, seemed to bask in its newfound good fortune. Cities gleamed under the clear skies, and people took to the streets to enjoy the unending summer. It was a reprieve, a vacation from the norm. People lounged in parks, took impromptu vacations, and soaked up the sun. It was as if the entire world had been granted an unexpected holiday. But like all vacations, it couldn't last forever. The novelty of endless sunshine began to wear thin, and the consequences of a world without rain started to become apparent. Beneath the surface of this sun-drenched euphoria, a subtle unease began to stir. People started to notice the changes in their environment, the dryness of the air, the parched earth beneath their feet. The ground, perpetually dry, felt different underfoot. It was harder, less forgiving, and cracks began to appear, spiderwebbing across the landscape. Rivers, once mighty and overflowing, slowed to a trickle. The lifeblood of the land was drying up, and with it, the vitality of the ecosystems that depended on it. The air, no longer cleansed by the regular baptism of rainfall, grew heavy and stagnant. Pollution levels rose, and the once clear skies began to haze over with smog. Whispers of concern rippled through farming communities as crops, deprived of their lifeblood, withered in the fields. The initial joy of the farmers turned to worry as they watched their livelihoods dry up before their eyes. The world, so recently jubilant, was holding its breath. People looked to the skies, hoping for a return of the rain, but the clouds remained stubbornly absent. The skies, once a canvas of ever-changing cloud formations, now stretched out, an endless azure expanse. The beauty of the clear skies became a haunting reminder of what was lost. The absence of rain brought a profound silence. The familiar sounds of water hitting the ground, the gentle murmur of rain on rooftops, were gone. Gone was the gentle patter on rooftops, the soothing sound that had lulled many to sleep. The rhythmic drumming on window panes, a comforting background noise, was now a distant memory. The roar of a summer downpour, a sound that once signaled life and renewal, was conspicuously absent. The world, in its newfound quietude, seemed to be listening, waiting, and perhaps a little afraid. The silence was not just the absence of sound, but the presence of a growing fear. The end of rain had ushered in an era of uncertainty, a world where the life-giving rhythm of precipitation was no more than a distant memory. The rain gauges stood empty, silent witnesses to a world that had irrevocably changed.
The initial weeks following the cessation of rain were marked by a strange duality. The skies, once perpetually grey and heavy with clouds, had given way to an unbroken expanse of blue. It was a sight that many had almost forgotten, a stark contrast to the relentless downpours that had defined their lives for so long. On one hand, there was a pervasive sense of disbelief, a collective shrug of the shoulders at the sheer improbability of it all. Conversations were dominated by the topic, with people speculating on the reasons behind this sudden change. Newspapers and news channels were filled with theories ranging from the scientific to the downright fantastical. People joked about washing their cars less often, about water bills plummeting. The novelty of dry weather brought a sense of relief and humour to daily life. Homeowners revelled in the reduced expenses, and children played outside without the constant threat of getting drenched.
The sun, a constant companion, became a source of both fascination and apprehension. Its unyielding presence was both a blessing and a curse. While it allowed for outdoor activities and a break from the gloom, it also brought with it the risk of sunburns and heat-related issues. Governments, caught off guard, scrambled to assess the situation. Emergency response teams were mobilised, and meetings were held to discuss potential long-term impacts. The sudden shift in weather patterns had left many unprepared, and the need for a coordinated response became evident. Initial reports downplayed the potential severity, focusing on the short-term benefits, a boost in tourism, a decrease in flood-related disasters. Beaches and parks saw an influx of visitors, and business that had suffered during the rainy season began to thrive once more. The stock market, after a brief dip, rallied, buoyed by the prospect of a sun-drenched future. Investors saw opportunities in sectors that had previously been hampered by the rain, and optimism drove a surge in economic activity. Humanity, it seemed, was adept at finding a silver lining, even in the most unexpected of clouds. Families spent more time outdoors and community events flourished. The collective mood lifted, and for a while, it seemed as though the world had been granted a reprieve.
However, beneath this veneer of normalcy, cracks were beginning to appear. The prolonged absence of rain started to take its toll on the environment. The once fertile land began to dry up, and the signs of an impending crisis became harder to ignore. Farmers, the backbone of many economies, faced mounting losses as crops failed. The lack of water made it impossible to sustain their livelihoods, and the agricultural sector began to suffer. The initial joy of sunny days gave way to the harsh reality of drought. Water rationing became commonplace in many cities, a stark reminder of the preciousness of this once abundant resource. Residents lined up at communal taps, and the daily struggle for water became a new norm. The scarcity of water brought with it a sense of urgency and desperation. The laughter and lightheartedness that had initially greeted the end of rain began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The reality of the situation began to sink in, and the mood shifted from one of celebration to one of concern. The silence of the skies became oppressive, a constant reminder of what was missing. The once welcome sight of clear skies now felt like a harbinger of doom, a visual representation of the absence of life-giving rain. The air, thick with dust and pollutants, grew heavy and difficult to breathe. The lack of rain meant that pollutants were no longer being washed away, and air quality deteriorated rapidly. Masks became a common sight, and respiratory issues began to rise. The sun, once a welcome guest, now felt like an unwelcome intruder, its relentless rays scorching the earth. Heat waves became more frequent, and the relentless heat made daily life increasingly difficult. The very source of light and warmth had turned into a symbol of hardship. The world, so recently bathed in sunshine and optimism, was beginning to feel the first unsettling pangs of thirst. The dry riverbeds and the sight of animals searching for water were stark reminders of the fragility of life and the delicate balance that sustains it. As weeks turned into months, the absence of rain began to manifest in increasingly tangible ways. The once lush and vibrant landscape started to fade, replaced by a harsh and unforgiving terrain. The skies, once filled with the promise of rain, remained stubbornly clear, offering no respite from the relentless drought. The most immediate and devastating impact was felt in the agricultural sector. Farmers, who had once relied on the predictable cycles of nature, found themselves at the mercy of an unyielding climate. Their crops, which had been their livelihood for generations, withered and died under the scorching sun. Crops withered and died, vast fields transformed into arid wastelands. The fertile soil, once teeming with life, turned to dust, carried away by the winds in massive dust storms that choked the air and blotted out the sun. Global food prices skyrocketed, leading to widespread shortages and unrest. Markets that had once been bustling with activity now stood empty, their shelves bare. People struggled to find enough food to feed their families, and the tension in the air was palpable. Water, once taken for granted, became a luxury. People lined up for hours to collect water from sparse sources, and water trucks became a common sight in towns and cities. The precious liquid was rationed carefully, with every drop counted and accounted for. Reservoirs and lakes dwindled, their once brimming depths reduced to muddy puddles. The great bodies of water that had sustained life for centuries were now mere shadows of their former selves, their dry, cracked beds a stark reminder of the severity of the drought.
Governments implemented strict water rationing programs, but even these proved insufficient to meet the burgeoning demand. People grew increasingly desperate, and the lines for water grew longer with each passing day. The strain on resources was immense, and the situation seemed to grow more dire by the hour. The world, so accustomed to the abundance of water, was forced to confront its own vulnerability. The drying taps and cracked earth served as a stark reminder of the fragility of our existence and the delicate balance that sustains life on this planet.
Ecosystems, finely balanced over millennia, began to unravel. The intricate web of life that had evolved over countless generations was now under threat, as plants and animals struggled to survive in the harsh new reality. Forests, starved of moisture, became tinderboxes, susceptible to massive wildfires that raged unchecked. The once green and vibrant forests were now charred and blackened, their destruction a testament to the power of nature's fury. Rivers and streams, once teeming with life, slowed to a trickle and eventually vanished altogether. The lifeblood of the land, these waterways had sustained countless species, and their disappearance signaled a profound shift in the natural order. Wildlife populations plummeted, unable to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. Animals that had once thrived in the lush landscapes now faced extinction, their habitats destroyed and their food sources depleted. The human toll was no less severe. Families were torn apart by the struggle to survive, and communities that had once been close-knit were now fractured by the pressures of the drought. Millions faced starvation as food supplies dwindled. The once plentiful harvests were now a distant memory, and people were forced to rely on food aid to survive. The lines for aid grew longer, and the desperation in people's eyes was unmistakable. Waterborne diseases, once thought to be a relic of the past, resurfaced with a vengeance. The lack of clean water led to outbreaks of illness, and the most vulnerable members of society were hit the hardest. Climate refugees displaced by drought and famine migrated in droves, putting a strain on already stretched resources. The camps that housed these refugees were overcrowded and under-resourced, and the conditions were dire. The world, so recently at peace, was on the brink of chaos. Protests erupted as people demanded action, and the social fabric began to fray. The whispers of worry had grown into a roar, and the future seemed uncertain. The planet, once vibrant and teeming with life, was slowly transforming into a parched, desolate landscape. The lush green tapestry of forests had given way to vast stretches of skeletal trees, their branches reaching towards the heavens in a silent plea for mercy. The once mighty rivers, the lifeblood of continents, had been reduced to dusty scars on the Earth's surface.
The animal kingdom was in disarray. Herds of animals, driven by thirst and hunger, migrated across continents, their ancient migratory routes rendered useless by the lack of water. Predators stalked weakened prey, their numbers dwindling with each passing day. The delicate balance of nature, carefully orchestrated over eons, had been irrevocably disrupted.
The skies, perpetually clear, offered no respite from the relentless sun. Temperatures soared, baking the earth and exacerbating the already dire situation. The air, thick with dust and smoke from wildfires, was a constant irritant, a visible reminder of the planet's plight. The oceans, once thought to be inexhaustible, began to feel the effects of the global drought. As freshwater sources dwindled, seawater became increasingly saline, disrupting marine ecosystems and threatening the livelihoods of millions who depended on the sea for sustenance. The planet, starved of its most precious resource, was slowly dying.